Out with the old, and in with the brand new. It's a brand new sound system, state of the art. If you look, we have two Myers speakers, the very top of the line, each one of which requires 4,000 watts of power. So that now the acoustics, which have always been very well balanced, at least have a sound system equal to the capacity of the room. True to form, with any facelift, we need some new chiseled chins and some perfect pictures. You note that we have 4 copies of the originals of the 4 portraits that are in the White House collection and hang in the East Room. If you will note, these are completely brand new reproductions that were done with the assistance of the White House Historical Association, beginning with the most famous of them all, the father of the country, George Washington, is now a complete renovation down to complete historical detail, and really I can't even begin to tell you how much better looking that is than it was just a month ago. It would not be complete without, at the same time, his partner in the White House and in his career as father of the country, mother of the country, Martha Washington, on my immediately right. To her left is the one and only, from Ohio, I might add, William McKinley. Now, I am going to leave it to our guest speaker, Bill Allman, curator of the White House for so many years, to tell us why William McKinley is, in fact, in the East Room. But he is in the East Room, and he's looking awfully good tonight after his remake. And on our far left, of course, he needs no introduction, TR, Teddy Roosevelt. These are touches that anyone will see, all of the business groups that use it, the historical groups, the programming that we do, the brides that are married here. But one of the must-haves that any overdue of a room like this had to have was visual acuity. President Nixon was a master communicator. He used television from the Oval Office 37 occasions. He's known for his checker speech. He's known for his silent majority speech. He's known for his resignation speech. He is known for having moved history with words. These days, however, for those of you who were here for the 50th anniversary of the Walking on the Moon with Buzz Aldrin, will realize that when we showed that tape, we showed it on one of the most extraordinarily improvised set of screens, and no kidding, what we used to hold up those screens were sandbags. We have now come a long way, a bit of an upgrade. Our brand new screens are from the Draper Company. They are 16 feet long, 9 feet wide. They each weigh 700 pounds, and luckily, they are automatic. They are so unique and top of the line, the latest equipment, that before they could be used, the fire department had to come and certify that they could be supported in place because of the great weight that must be borne upon them. As a result of these new screens, the experiences that we have here, whether they are private business organizations or presentations on President Nixon's legacy, his environmental record of starting the EPA, signing the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, signing Title IX to benefit every woman under the age of, or over the age of 1971 in high school, whether or not with his trips to China, it will all be shown on these screens, as we will demonstrate very, very shortly. We have in this room now as well 2 new projectors in 4K HD, 21,000 lumens each. I don't often like to brag, but each of these projectors cost $56,000 each. And our first use of this AV is to demonstrate the new logo of the Nixon Library. It's a signature logo that has been designed to represent President Nixon's unique achievement in the presidency of the United States as the grand strategist. So 30 years ago, we had an original seal. We have kept elements of that, but we have now updated it to feature a globe to represent President Nixon's mastery in foreign affairs, his longtime role as America's relentless, leading global grand strategist, managing great power competition, which remains to this very moment the most important competition there can possibly be. This new logo is now reflected all across our organization on every bit of furniture. I just did the third handoff of a microphone as we upgrade. Every element of this room now replicates exactly the elements used in the White House East Room. In fact, our new logo, which you see in front of us, will be on every podium exactly as they are in the President's use, the presidential seal of the United States whenever he appears. So now I want to show all of the new elements of this remarkable room working together, the lighting, this wonderful stage, which is an improvement over the shaky, almost like an earthquake to stand on stage of 30 years, the screens, the video, this great audience. If you will bear with me, we will now show you a video about President Nixon at the summit of his powers, making his entree to China, bringing to a successful conclusion the Vietnam War, negotiating a nuclear accord with the Soviet Union, bringing a peaceful end to Yom Kippur War, and saving the State of Israel. We have a video to show you now about these consequential events of the Nixon presidency.
On July 15, 1971, President Nixon requested time on national TV.
The announcement I shall now read is being issued simultaneously in Peking and in the United States. Knowing of President Nixon's expressed desire to visit the People's Republic of China, Premier Zhou Enlai, on behalf of the government of the People's Republic of China, has extended an invitation to President Nixon to visit China.
The effect was electric. The idea was almost unimaginable. The Washington Post said, if Mr. Nixon had revealed he was going to the moon, he could not have flabbergasted his world audience more. The Cold War was raging. In Southeast Asia, China was North Vietnam's ally, and Richard Nixon's credentials as an anti-communist were long-standing and impeccable. But in the fall of 1967, Nixon wrote a seminal article about Asia after Vietnam. Taking the long view, he wrote, we simply cannot afford to leave China forever outside the family of nations. There is no place on this small planet for 1 billion of its potentially most able people to live in angry isolation. In January 1969, in his first inaugural address, President Nixon confirmed his determination to change America's policy toward China.
We seek an open world, a world in which no people, great or small, will live in angry isolation.
On February 17, 1972, after 2 years of secret and delicate negotiations, the President and First Lady were on their way to China. Premier Zhou Enlai was waiting at Beijing. In 1954, the U.S. Secretary of State had snubbed the then foreign minister. Nixon wrote in his memoirs, I knew that Joe had been deeply insulted by Foster Dulles' refusal to shake hands with him. When I reached the bottom of the steps, therefore, I made a point of extending my hand as I walked toward him. When our hands met, one era ended and another began. A few hours later, the President met with Chairman Mao Zedong. The 79-year-old leader was in frail health, but the lively hour-long meeting included philosophy, history, and banter. Mao said, I voted for you during your last election. Nixon said, I think the most important thing to note is that in America, at least at this time, those on the right can do what those on the left can only talk about. Throughout his career, Richard Nixon always reserved time for strategic thinking, making and refining extensive notes on yellow pads. In preparation for his China trip, he considered all the possible permutations of policy involved. what they want, what we want, what we both want. At the Great Hall of the People, the President and the Premier exchanged toasts.
Said in your toast, the Chinese people are a great people. The American people are a great people. We have at times in the past been enemies. We have great differences today. What brings us together is that we have common interests which transcend those differences.
At the end of the trip, diplomatic ground was broken with the Shanghai Communique. After covering the points on which both sides had reached agreement, they proceeded to detail their different positions on all the other outstanding issues. Nixon referred to this in his final toast to Shanghai on the eve of his departure.
That communique will make headlines around the world tomorrow. But what we have said in that communique is not nearly as important as what we will do in the years ahead. We have been here a week. This was the week that changed the world.
During a visit to the Great Wall, the President reflected on the purpose and potential of the trip.
And one stands there and sees the wall going to the peak of this mountain, and I think that you would have to conclude that this is a great wall and that it had to be built by a great people. I think one of the results of our trip, we hope, may be that the walls that are erected, whether they are physical walls like this or whether they are other walls of ideology or philosophy, will not divide peoples in the world. That peoples, regardless of their differences in backgrounds and their philosophies, will have an opportunity to communicate with each other, to know each other, and to share with each other those particular endeavors that will mean peaceful progress in the years ahead.
Well, goodbye.
After President Nixon returned home, Clare Boothe Luce told him that 1,000 years from now, they will say of you, he went to China. And it began 40 years ago with a week that changed the world.
Thank you very much to our team. What you do not see that is downstairs is a broadcast and recording studio. It is the Charlie and Ling Zang broadcast and recording studio that makes possible the perfect audio that you just heard and the reproduction of the images as they were seen and could be seen in 1972. Charlie and Ling Zang, in fact, paid for everything in this room that we have seen tonight. And on behalf of Dr. Kavanaugh and every member of the board and everyone who has used this in the past and in the future, I want to say thank you and tell very briefly the story that on the first day that I returned as the director of the library, the president of the foundation, Jim Byron said, "Come meet Charlie for lunch," and we did. And I told Charlie about our need in this room, and within 1 minute, Charlie said he was going to go out on a limb. He hadn't taught the Ling yet, but he was going to confirm it with her, and he would make it happen. That was July 1st. We are here on President Nixon's birthday, 107 years ago today, and I would like to welcome up on stage Charlie and Ling Zang to accept our thank you for making this all very possible. Charlie and Ling and Jim Kavanaugh. Dr. Kavanaugh, will you come up with us?
This is a gift from us to you. A flag that was thrown over the birthplace today. And some flowers for you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
picture of the four of us. Thank you. Now tonight, we are in for it. Thank you again. We're in for a lot of fun tonight, but we always at the Nixon Library begin the same way. We want to celebrate this country by standing, please, for the presentation of the colors and the singing of our national anthem. We have a lot of treats in store for us tonight. Please be seated. I want to begin by introducing Jim's old friend and my new friend, Bill Allman. Bill became the curator of the White House on August 1st, 2002, having served in the office as curatorial assistant and then assistant curator since 1976. The office of the curator is charged with the preservation and the study of the collection of art, furniture, and decorative objects used to furnish both the public and the private rooms in the White House. As an official resident, as an accredited historic house museum, it also maintains a wide variety of historical records about the building. He is a native and a resident of Bethesda, Maryland. Bill holds his BA in history from the University of Maryland, an MA in American Studies with a museum concentration from the George Washington University, and he is our special guest tonight. The music that will follow will be from OC Music and Art but we begin first with the history of the White House from our friend Bill Allman. Bill, please join us on stage.
I have to tell you to start that we were in here this afternoon consulting on the new installation of all this wonderful stuff, and they had put the podium here, and I'd been used to the fact that sometimes you're at a center podium and they put a screen down behind you, and those people can't see that side and these people can't see this side. And when I noticed that there were 2 slots in the ceiling there, the installing person from your staff here said, "I did it right," and somebody noticed. Because I'm in between, Hugh was in between, you know. You can see, and I can talk, and everybody will be happy, hopefully. So it's a pleasure to be here this afternoon. Let's see, I have to learn how to do this here. Maybe it's working? There we go. Okay, this is the East Room East. As it looked, gee, I'm casting a shadow here. That's an interesting concept. That may be because of the C-SPAN people, not because of your regular installation here. This is a picture that was taken in 1972. So this is a Nixon-era picture of the East Room, which is the reason that this room exists here today to help pursue the mission of the Nixon Foundation and the Nixon Library. But what I'm going to do is tell you a little bit about the history of the East Room over time, starting with the winter of 1800-1801. So John and Abigail Adams moved in November. They were going to only serve for 4 months before Thomas Jefferson would assume the presidency. The East Room was unfinished, and so Abigail Adams said, "Well, I'm not hanging my laundry out for the public to see. And it's cold out there, so I don't need any frozen laundry either. So let's put it in the East Room." So this drawing was done for the National Geographic for one of the White House publications back in the Kennedy administration. And it shows Abigail Adams supervising the hanging of the laundry in the East Room. Now the room remained unfinished until 1814, when the British set fire to the White House during the War of 1812. So then it fell to President and Mrs. James Monroe to refurbish the rebuilt room after the fire, and they ran out of money again, and it stayed unfinished until the Jackson administration. So really the East Room's history for the first 29 years or so was empty, full of laundry, destroyed by fire, empty for some more decades. And so, yeah, maybe. There we go. So this picture shows a print of the room in the 1850s, but what it shows is the furnishings that had survived from those other administrations. The 3 tables down the middle of the room were made for Andrew Jackson in 1829 by Anthony Curvell in Philadelphia, and they still exist. So you see one here. There's 2 of them that flank the Lincoln bed now, in the Lincoln bedroom, and one is in the Vermeer room on the ground floor as part of the tour route. Also in the room, this is the earliest known photograph of the room, taken probably about 1867, and it shows seat furniture around the room. Chairs, you could see around the edges, of which we own 4. Now, unlike the 3 Curvell tables that have been in the White House from 1829 continuously till now, the chairs were used in the East Room from 1817 until 1874. And then in 1882, they were sold at the big Chester Arthur garage sale. In the 19th century, it was perfectly legal when you came in as the president. They would say, "Here's some money to move in, and if that's not enough, just get rid of the stuff you don't like and make some more money to buy what you need." So pretty much throughout the 19th century, you had entire administration's, the taste, as exhibited in the decorative arts, disappear. And so we now have 4 of those chairs, all of which have come back since Mrs. Kennedy's time. One, actually, the office just acquired about 4 months ago. They were made in Georgetown by William King. He was a local cabinet maker in the District of Columbia. Now here's a picture of the room in 1858 for a reception being held by President James Buchanan. Mr. Buchanan is in the black suit, bent over just slightly at the left-hand side, shaking hands with guests. So this is how the East Room would have been used most of the time, for big receptions with lots of people being entertained. You'll see on the right-hand side of that picture up above the door, there's a white marble bust. And that's the white marble bust that you see on this other screen, well, beside it in the picture. This is, there were 3 marble busts purchased by President James Monroe in 1817, and they represented, there was Amerigo Vespucci and Christopher Columbus for, in discovering America. Regardless of what the Native Americans thought, they are credited with discovering America. And then George Washington. And what in fact they represented was Washington, the District of Columbia, as in Christopher Columbus, in the United States of America, as in Amerigo Vespucci. So they actually had a symbolic reason for existing as representing the elements of what the city was in the post-fire rebuilt White House. The funny thing was, by the late 19th century, inventories were taken only occasionally, usually at the end of an administration, just so the next people could know what they were going to find there. This marble bust, which was done by Giuseppe Ceracchi, looks rather classical. It was now listed in the inventory as unknown Roman gentleman. It had completely lost its George Washington association. Not the most obvious George Washington, I guess. Now here is an 1862 engraving of a reception in that same East Room. Now clearly artists had been there, understood how the chandeliers looked, how the draperies looked, but he's built a room that's big enough to hold 10,000 people. I mean, look at him, there's just thousands of them in there. Newspaper engravings were the way you understood places prior to photography, and he missed the boat on this one. Now in 1884, an interesting event that took place was President Chester Arthur, who you can see standing, he's holding the piece of paper to the right of the desk. He opened the New Orleans World's Industrial and Cotton Exposition by standing in the East Room with a whole lot of people that were there to enjoy the event, and then pushing a telegraph key that would send a message to New Orleans saying the president has just officially opened the event. So it's these kinds of really big things that took place in the room, not so much what would happen in the 20th century. I mean, it still continues to be that, but with a broader variety of things. Here's the way the room would have been late in the 19th century. What you see there is architecture, columns that have no structural purpose. They're just pretty, put underneath cross beams that have no structural purpose. They're just pretty. They were done in 1874 for the wedding of President Grant's daughter. They redid the room. They did the mantelpieces and all of the furnishings in the room. And here you would see just people that may have been, the East Room was always open to the public. Not every parlor was, because the family lived more in the red room and the blue room than they do today, because there were fewer rooms on the second floor, because the president's offices occupied about a third of the second floor. There was no West Wing until 1902. And sometimes the East Room in that period looked like you see on the left there. It was what some of the press people called, the style of the East Room is steamboat Gothic. Because it looked like a Mississippi River steamboat, or a big hotel lobby with circular sofas and potted palms. But those chandeliers and the chandeliers date from the Grant administration, and the furniture dates from Chester Arthur's continuation of what President Garfield had started in 1881. And one of the few pieces surviving from that is this sofa, this ebony upholstered sofa that was given back to the White House in 1962. So those things that got away in the sales oftentimes come back to our office, with stories about grandmother said this came from the White House. And, every once in a while we can prove it because the photographs back it up or the object backs it up. Sometimes when they say, oh, well, this was Thomas Jefferson's table, and it's kind of like, yeah, but remember there was a fire and they didn't save any of the furniture, so it really can't be. And besides, it looks like it was made in 1930. So one of the events that happens in the East Room are state funerals. 7 of the 8 presidents who died in office have lain in state in the East Room, the only exception being President Garfield. Because when he was assassinated, which is kind of an unexpected way to go, in 1881, the room was torn up like it would be today with them laying new floor in a renovation of the East Room. So the one you see on the left here is the casket of President William McKinley. So I've been asked to explain why President William McKinley's portrait hangs in the East Room. Well, partly it's a nice visual comparison with Teddy Roosevelt. Partly it's also because they bookend the centuries of White House history. McKinley being the one who was there at the end of the 19th century, the end of the house being as modern as they could afford, so that you would see potted palms and big Victorian furniture. And then Theodore Roosevelt coming in to office in 1901 and then in 1902, directing that a neoclassical interior was something that he needed to, for Europeans, for visiting dignitaries to understand that we're not steamboat Gothic. We have some sense of style and taste, even if it has nothing to do with American taste. It's very, very much French. And on the right-hand side, you see one of the last events that President Roosevelt staged, and it was one of the reasons I think that he did his 1902 renovation. So that's the East Room, set up for dinner for Prince Henry of Prussia. He was the brother of the Kaiser Wilhelm II. He'd come to the United States to take delivery of a new imperial yacht in New York. And they came and traveled all around the United States, and so this was a stag dinner. No ladies were invited. It was military, and maybe that was because it was a German prince. But you could see how very Victorian and exotic it looked. And that was Theodore Roosevelt said, well, one, in order to have a dinner that big, they couldn't fit it in the state dining room. And so they had it in the East Room. Well, when the food came up from the kitchen, went all the way the length of the house and got served to the guests in the East Room, basically dinner was kind of cold. So one of the things he had done as part of the 1902 renovation was to enlarge the state dining room so that there could be better meals in the house, and then modernize the East Room. So there's Theodore Roosevelt, the portrait that you see reproduced in the corner there, painted by John Singer Sargent in 1903. The story says that Teddy Roosevelt was coming down the stairs one day when Sargent was at the bottom of the stairs, and he said, Mr. President, when will you let me paint your portrait? I've been hired to do this, and you never sit still. And he put his hand up on the newel post and said, well, paint me now. Now, the problem is that newel post doesn't show up on any White House staircase. So the concept may have been right, the inspiration may have been right, but I don't think the artist actually painted what he found. But it, is one of the absolute best portraits in the White House collection. So Theodore Roosevelt and his wife, Edith, they hired McKim, Mead & White, the New York architects, to do a renovation of the public rooms, which included enlarging the state dining room. It included building the West Wing so that the family wouldn't have to share the second floor with the president's offices. You'd have people coming upstairs to go to the president's office, and then they would wander through Mrs. Roosevelt's bedroom at 7 o'clock in the morning, and she was like, wait a minute. They had 6 kids. There weren't enough bedrooms. They had to double up with all the children. And so McKim, Mead & White decided they would take out these Victorian interiors and introduce something much more neoclassical. And so this was what the East Room came out. That's a picture about 1904. of showing pretty much what you see today. I mean, the draperies were red then, not yellow, and not gold like they are today, but the same floor pattern, the same architecture. The ceiling was simplified later on. Theodore Roosevelt used the room for two important things. One was they introduced a whole series of events called musicales. And in fact, tomorrow night would have probably been the 100 and something anniversary of one of those musicales. They were held on 4 consecutive Fridays in January. January was the social season. You entertained from late December through early February before the weather got bad in Washington and you didn't have air conditioning. And so there would have been one of these musicales where they would have invited maybe 30, 40 people for dinner and then 500 to listen to music. I don't know how they even got them all in the East Room. They had to have been standing up a great deal of the time because you can't put that many chairs in the room. But he also enjoyed using the East Room as basically a gymnasium. And so one of the things he had in 1904 was regular sessions with 2 Japanese jiu-jitsu wrestlers. They'd come 3 times a week, and Theodore Roosevelt said he was not of an age or build to be twirled and batted down without damage. And about a month later, he said, I'm probably through with it. After an 8-hour grapple with senators and congressmen, I feel like a stewed owl. I'm not sure what that feels like, but have been shown 3 new throws that are perfect corkers. So he really liked what he was getting from his instructors, but it was taking its toll on his body, apparently. Oh, we can go back for just a second. You can see the chandelier there. There were 3 chandeliers. They were provided by Edward Caldwell, which was a New York. They assembled them out of parts they got from other places. So in fact, the glass came from what's now the Czech Republic. It was Bohemian glass. And you can see there's sort of a mid-range group of little hooks. So the chandeliers are actually originally taller than they are now, than they are here, because they were extra long and came closer to the floor than they do now. But you can also see in the room the wonderful architecture that was based on the Chateau de Compiègne outside of Paris, the pilasters and the neoclassical panels. At one point, it was described that they were supposed to be Aesop's fables, but there's really nothing that can be identified as that. They're just neoclassical scenes based on a French palace. So there's the chandelier as you see it now, it's been reduced in the stem. Also, light standards are at the ends of the rooms where your flags are usually light standards in the real room. They were also provided by Caldwell, gilded bronze with glass fruit ornaments hanging on the arms. Electrified. All of these were the first, not the absolute first, but this was the first installation where everything was electrified. In 1891, they installed electricity in the White House, but they kept all the gas fixtures and they simply added electric wiring to the gas units. In fact, President and Mrs. Benjamin Harrison, who were in the White House at the time, wouldn't touch the switches. So somebody had to go around and turn the lights on and off for them all the time because they were scared the electricity was going to zap them. So then there was very little furniture. The room was really not like the 19th century room with huge amounts of big circular sofas and things. It was designed with just a series of banquettes in 2 different sizes that were placed around the edges of the room. And there was a spectacular piano provided in January 1903 by Steinway and Company. It was the 100,000th piano made by the company. They were very proud of having immigrated from Hungary in the mid-19th century and taken a large portion of the American piano manufacturing industry. And it had beautiful top painted inside the cover, painted by the American Impressionist artist Thomas Dewing. And it shows the woman in the center is America, and she's being wooed by the 9 muses of the classical arts from Greek times. So this piano stayed in the room from 1903 to 1938, and then Steinway offered number 300,000, which is the piano that you see in this very early color photograph of the White House in 1938. Again, the pianos were kept over in the corner. It was kind of like, you only rolled them out when you needed them, basically, because you still had lots of big events in the room. But you can also see in that picture, there's Martha Washington. She and George Washington didn't hang in the East Room until 1929. They had been in other rooms on the state floor. But it's the E.F. Andrews portrait that he created out of life portraits of the face of Martha Washington, clothing that was from 1870s, and hands that were modeled by President Hayes's niece. So they had hand models back then, and then the great portrait of George Washington by Gilbert Stuart, which is the most important object in the White House collection because it was hanging on the walls in 1800 when the Adamses moved in. It was saved from the fire by Donnelly Madison in 1814, and so it's our longest continuous art object. Now, in 1949, President Truman was told, you can't live in the White House anymore, it's going to fall down. And so they did engineering studies. He moved across the street to Blair House, and the Corps of Engineers of the Army Department was given the job. They contracted out to various companies, and they took out the insides of the White House. So basically, if you look kind of see the really dark window in the kind of off to the side in the middle. If you go up one floor, that's the East Room. So the East Room is gone. Everything in the inside of the house is gone. So nothing dates back to the original days except for they reused windows, they reused shutters, they mostly reused plaster as models for new plaster. And then they dug 2 levels of basement underground to provide places for storage, the laundry, things that had always taken up other good space in the house. And then they put a steel frame and built it back up, put in central air and central heating. And so the White House is, even our own interior rooms are not strictly original. So this is the East Room in 1973. Again, it's a Nixon era picture. I use it to show the 1938 Steinway piano a little bit better, and also you could see some of the details on the case. It was specially designed with 6 images to represent American music and dance, and then it had eagles as the legs. So this is the piano that continues to be used all the time. The Marine Band plays this for either just the piano or as part of ensembles. Generally, when a really high-end classical pianist comes to the White House, they bring their own piano because the actions are different between one piano and another. But this is the piano that was made rather famous by President Nixon because they had a 70th birthday party for Duke Ellington, the great jazz composer and performer who was a native Washingtonian. And so there's President Nixon sitting at the piano with Duke Ellington sitting beside him, playing on the piano, basically, to wish Ellington happy birthday. And then you have both of them getting up and standing to talk to the audience and enjoying themselves immensely. It was also used by President Nixon when he sat down at the keyboard and played along with Pearl Bailey, who was a famous African-American jazz singer who was also starring at the time on Broadway in Hello, Dolly, a remake of the Carol Channing role. Now, what else does the East Room use for? Well, occasionally it's used for state dinners, state meals. The state dining room is the goal, but many times you have a crowd that's just too big. Everybody wants to come to the dinner for somebody really prominent and maybe not so many for the prime minister of some small country. But anyway, this is President Jimmy Carter in 1980, doing a luncheon for the King of the Belgians in the East Room. So you can see a little bit of the light standard and the gold drapes in the background. Now this is the state dining room for a dinner for Prime Minister Trudeau of Canada in 2016. So things change. There is nothing permanent about the way things are done. Sometimes the curator's office has to sort of suggest that, well, we've tried it before and it didn't work, so let's not try it again. But one of the things that designers for President and Mrs. Obama like to do were, sort of liven it up and make it more modern. And so they projected designs on the ceiling filled the window with plant material, and then a set of head table and circular tables rather than just all circular tables. So it's always possible to have different combinations. So usually for a state dinner, when the dinner's in the dining room, the East Room is where you have entertainment. And so here's President and Mrs. George H.W. Bush being, with the President of Brazil being entertained by Gloria Estefan, who's now stepped off the stage and is strutting her stuff as she sings some hot salsa song. And then on the right-hand side is Yo-Yo Ma with his cello up on stage, being accompanied, though, by the 1938 Steinway piano and the guests. And there's Georgia Martha Washington flanking that east side window. Sometimes after state dinners, you have dancing in two cases. Well, in one case, on the left-hand side, that's President Ford entertaining Queen Elizabeth II on the 1976 bicentennial of American independence on July 7th. The dinner was in a tent, and then dancing was in the East Room. And then the year before, 1975, Susan Ford, his daughter, had her high school prom in the East Room. She went to school in local, suburban Maryland, and what better thing to deliver to your classmates than, hey, we're going to have prom at the White House. And so there she is dancing up a storm. You can see the pattern in the floor very clearly, this Fontainebleau pattern that's been in the room since 1992. Sometimes there's just special events that don't have any particular diplomatic point of view. The one on the left is President and Mrs. Kennedy. They entertained all of the Nobel Prize winners of the Americas at a dinner at the White House, and then entertainment in the East Room. So you see Mrs. Kennedy talking to poet Carl Sandburg, and President Kennedy talking to Pearl Buck, the noted American author. This was the time when President Kennedy made a rather famous remark, and he said, "I think this is the most extraordinary collection of talent, of human knowledge, that has ever been gathered together at the White House, with the possible exception of when Thomas Jefferson dined here alone." And on the lower right was the 200th anniversary of the Adamses moving into the White House. So this was the year 2000. So this is November 2000. We've got this anniversary coming up. We've got half the world, well, everybody celebrating the millennium, which in fact didn't happen until 2001, but nonetheless. And then you also had the disputed election. President Bush running against Vice President Gore, and the hanging chads and all the going to the Supreme Court. But they invited all the former presidents and first ladies. So you could see, I think it's Mrs. Ford, President Carter, Mrs. Bush, and President Ford, and then it moves on down the table. And then President Clinton, who is the occupant, making remarks. But in both cases, President Ford and President Carter got up and made glowing remarks about the staff, about the resident staff, not the political staff, but the people who work administration after administration and are completely trustworthy and completely hardworking. And they just waxed rhapsodic about us. But they had made a new China service for this dinner, which was going to be called the Bicentennial China. And then some people tried to call it the Millennium China, and then it just became called the Clinton China, even though the Clintons didn't technically ask for it to be made. And we only had just enough of it for the people at the head table to all eat off the china, because it was still in the factory, and everybody else at all the other tables got a service plate and then had to eat off some other administration's china. But it was a nice evening. Weddings happened at the White House. We talked about President Grant's daughter. The room was redecorated. Well, there's Lyndon Johnson marrying Chuck Robb, who was not then yet a U.S. Senator, coming down from the center window, basically coming right to about there, off of the stage. You could have birthdays. This is President Reagan celebrating his 70th birthday with Mrs. Reagan and the maitre d' looking at this enormous cake that had been made for him. Press conferences frequently happen there. There are lots of them to use. I used this one because it was one of those rare occasions where there was an elevated view, and you could really see the 3 chandeliers and the draperies with the original 1902 cornices over the drapes. special awards ceremonies. On the left, you see President Truman in 1945 giving the Medal of Honor to an American serviceman from World War II. The counterpart to the Medal of Honor for civilian service is the Medal of Freedom. And there's President Obama trying to put the medal on Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I mean, President Obama was not a short man, and he is certainly dwarfed by an NBA basketball player. It was also the scene where President Nixon, at the left, congratulated Mrs. Nixon, standing beside him, at an evening reception for a redecoration of the Blue Room. That was part of working with the Curator's office, working with the Committee for the Preservation of the White House. Mrs. Nixon did enormous work for the White House collection and gets very little credit for it. Everybody thinks of Mrs. Kennedy, but she started it. You know, anybody who starts something gets the most adulation, I guess. But Mrs. Nixon actually added more things to the White House collection than were required in the Kennedy administration. And you can see her there, standing in the Blue Room earlier in the day when she unveiled the room to the public. Now, it's changed considerably since then. You know, the rooms don't stay that way, and so many people come to us and say, well, how dare you change something Mrs. Kennedy created? And it's like, you don't understand. Mrs. Kennedy didn't intend for these to be permanent. She figured there'd be new research, there'd be new scholarship, new taste, and that rooms would change as time went on. One of the nice things for Mrs. Nixon was that Mrs. Kennedy had gotten back one of those gold chairs that were purchased for the room by President Monroe in 1817, but got away at auction in 1860. And then Mrs. Nixon got 4 more chairs back from people who had the right provenance, so you could study the chairs and find the right marks and the right tooth saw marks and that kind of thing. Even yours truly has made a performance in the White House. This was an event in the Obama administration celebrating the collection of the adding of more abstract modern art to the White House permanent collection. And so I was asked to speak. We always took a very low profile, and suddenly Mrs. Obama kept saying, well, she drew on all of us. She said, if it's flowers, let the florist talk. If it's food, let the chef talk. And if it's art, let the curator talk. And so anyway, there I am talking. That's why, other than giving tours, that's my one big East Room moment, other than going to that 2000 dinner for the anniversary. Christmas at the White House. This window, basically, you open the drapes and you fill it with the creche, the Christmas scene made of 18th century nativity figures. And then there's usually lots of trees all over the house and lots of people. Busiest time of the year is the Christmas holidays, between special tours and social events. Now, the East Room's been open to the public, I said, as for tourists, for tourism, for visitation purposes. This 1885 print that we acquired for the collection that was from a newspaper shows, people examining the drapes. Let's touch them, why not, That doesn't make them any more fragile. And a more modern time, this is July 1st, 2015, the first day they allowed photography by tourists in the White House. Now, this wasn't necessarily a curatorial decision. It was more kind of reality that every museum was offering the opportunity to take pictures because everybody wants to Snapchat or whatever all those platforms are. But I love the fact that this little girl looked a lot like this older woman here, and she's trying to figure out, okay, what exactly is this metal screen that covers it's wire mesh that hangs down to protect the fireplace? Well, her mother's busy taking pictures. And then the ubiquitous selfie. So you got people taking pictures. The poor officer from the Secret Service who's there to give information is pretty much being ignored because it's the collecting of pictures that's more important than actually the learning of information, I think, now. But you can see the chandelier there, and a little bit of George Washington, the picture on the right. There are sad moments. President Nixon departure scene from right in front of this curtain. in August 9th, 1974. But there are also really happy ones for the Nixon administration. This was February 22nd, 1969. It was President George Washington's birthday, and they staged a production of the Broadway musical 1776 with the original cast. And so there is, this is the stage that was built at that end of the room, and people sitting out here that you're looking down the long center corridor would be going out that direction. And now this is the chandelier that's not as long as it was originally, and you can see how close it's getting to somebody up on that stage. In 1978, in the Carter administration, Mikhail Baryshnikov came to the White House. He was going to dance one of these in performance at the White House that you see on public television. And he walked in, and they said, well, the stage will be here, and it'll be about here. And he looks up and goes, the chandelier has to go. And we all went, not on your life. You know how much effort it takes to take a chandelier down? Well, you do. The people here do. The funny thing about it was, one of the things we always discovered, the tours are provided by the Secret Service. And for a long time, they got asked a lot of questions by people about, it seemed to be, how much is it worth? They have to wrap their minds around it in terms of how valuable it is. Or in the case of the chandeliers, how much does it weigh? I suppose they're figuring that if it dropped on you, would you be dead or not? I don't. And the tour officers basically had made it up. They said 1,200 pounds. Wow. Well, then we did conservation to them, and we took them down and completely disassembled them and repinned all the glass stuff, and we asked the company that was doing the cleaning and work, they said, would you please weigh all the parts? 600 pounds. They were off by a factor of 2. And, they had over-exaggerated, but 6,000 pieces of glass in those chandeliers. And then here at the end of that production of 1776, you have President Nixon on the left, chatting up John Adams and Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin, two of whom were soon to be presidents. And on the right, Mrs. Nixon chatting up the only 2 female characters in the show, Mrs. Adams and Mrs. Jefferson. And thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Allman. Bill, what a treat it is to have Bill Allman with us tonight. Bill Allman is the most recent White House curator. He's only been retired for 2 years. So I don't know that there's anybody that's alive that knows more about the White House than Bill Allman. So thank you again, sir, for being here with us tonight. My name is Jim Byron. I am the Executive Vice President of the Richard Nixon Foundation, and it is my job this evening, my pleasure this evening, to introduce the students of OC Music and Dance, who will be performing for us in just a few minutes. But let me tell you first about OC Music and Dance. They are a nonprofit community performing arts school. Their mission, their goal is to make the arts accessible to every child, regardless of his or her financial circumstances, so that every child will have the opportunity to develop his or her innate talents. Of course, the school was founded by Charlie and Ling Zang, who we honor tonight, our special honored guests. But I also want to welcome Doug Freeman, who's the executive chairman, and he's here with us tonight. Doug. And now it's my pleasure to introduce David Dunford, who is the executive vice president of the school. Who's putting the finishing touches on. There he is.
Thank you. Handing off? All right, we've got it done. It works. It's great to be here. We have a wonderful relationship with the Nixon Foundation, Nixon Library. They've been so wonderful to give us this space to host our young students, to give them a place to play. And so we're really, really delighted to do this concert here for all of you. in this newly refurbished area. First group that we're going to do, we have some string players for you, we have some singers for you, and a dancer as well, so it'll be a little bit of a mixed program. Our first group, after you learn a little bit of instrument, you get to play chamber music, and chamber music is a small group. It's not directed by anybody, and as our little group was rehearsing today, it was really, really wonderful because they were actually talking amongst themselves and working the music out amongst themselves. The group, they're two 11-year-olds and a 12-year-old. So we have a pianist, a violinist, and a cellist, and they're going to be playing the first movement of the Dumke Trio, and if they want to start taking their places and get ready, that would be wonderful. Let's give them a little encouragement. There they go. So the trio that they're playing is called the Dumke Trio, and that's kind of a funny name for a trio, Dumke. I looked it up today just to kind of figure out what in the world that was all about. And the Dumke Trio is actually plural for Dumka, and Dumka is Ukrainian, and it's basically a ballad or a song of epic proportions with a lot of angst and a lot of emotion, with these little moments of happy times in it. And so as you hear them play this first piece, you will definitely hear the angst, and you will hear the emotion, and if you listen real carefully, you'll hear the moments of happiness, isn't it, as well? So I'll let them get set up, and let's give them a round of applause. Thank you very much. As they were getting ready and rehearsing here, you know, we were wondering, we've got that huge piano there. How are we going to get that on the stage? And should we put them up here so anyone can see? But now, because of our video, every place in this room is a stage. So this is really, really wonderful. So thank you so much, Charlie, for all of that. Just a little bit more about the group. They started meeting in December through a program called Junior Chamber Music. Junior Chamber Music puts together people from all over the LA area, from different schools and studios, and they get together and they have 8 coachings, of which they've had 4, and they play a concert, I think, at UCI in March. So it's wonderful to hear all these people get together and have this really, really wonderful experience expressing music and working on music without those adults there. So as I said, we're Orange County Music and Dance, and so we'd like to feature a dance item now. And this, Michelle, comes from the Yaya Dance Academy, which also is at our school. Yaya has been very, very helpful in providing her expertise and her talents in all kinds of dances. We have hip-hop dance, we have Chinese, we have folkloric dance, and so I'm not exactly sure what style Michelle's going to do today, but let's give her some encouragement as she takes the stage.
Merpala, Mahajala, Gucci Tila, Tachishiva, Nkapala, Ntupala, Himapala,
Thank you very much, Michelle. That was wonderful. I was wondering if you were going to fit on that stage, but you did. We have 3 vocalists for you today. We have a really thriving voice department. We do classically trained voice, we do Broadway, but we also do pop voice. And one of our performers here might be related to somebody you've heard before. We'll let them. But as they're young and rising stars, they get a chance to take the stage. And since they'll have the mic, I'm going to let them introduce themselves and let you know what they're doing. So please give some encouragement to our first young vocalist.
everyone. Thank you so much. I'm Alicia Liston, and I am so honored to be here at the Richard Nixon Library. This has been an amazing opportunity, and I am so excited. So this is going to be a bit more of an upbeat song. So, okay, a lot more. But I really hope you enjoy it. So, yeah, please enjoy. This is Champion by Carrie Underwood. I'll be the last one standing, 2 hands in the air, I'm a champion. You'll be looking up at me when it's over. I live for the battle, I'm a soldier, yeah. I'm a fighter like Rocky, put you flat on your back like Ali. I'm the greatest, I'm stronger, paid my dues, cannot lose, I'm my own, yeah. Hey, been working my whole life, and now it's do or die. I am invincible, unbreakable, unstoppable, unshakable. They knock me down, I get up again. I am the champion, you're gonna know my name. You can't hurt me now, I can't feel the pain. I was made for this, I was born to win. I am the champion. When they write my story, they're gonna say that I did it for the glory. But don't think that I did it for the fame, yeah. I did it for the love of the game, yeah. So this is my chance I'm taking. All the mold records I'm breaking. All you people watching on the TV, go ahead and put your bets on me. Hey, I've been waiting my whole life to see my name in lights. I am invincible, unbreakable, unstoppable, unshakable. They knock me down, I get up again. I am the champion, you're gonna know my name. You can't hurt me now, I can't feel the pain. I was made for this, I was born to win. I am the champion. The C is for the courage I possess through the drama. H is for the hurt, but it's all for the honor. A is for my attitude, working through the patience. Money comes and goes, so the M is for motivation. Gotta stay consistent, the P is to persevere. I is for integrity, innovative career. The O is optimistic, open and never shut. And the N is necessary, cause I'm never giving up. See, they ask me how I did it, I just did it from the heart. Pushing the competition, been doing it from the start. Say that every champion is all about his principles. I am invincible, unbreakable, unstoppable, unshakable. They knock me down, I get up again. I am the champion, you're gonna know my name. You can't hurt me now, I can't feel the pain. I was made for this, I was born to win. I am the champion. Oh, oh, oh. I am the champion. I am the champion. Thank you all so much. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Justin Freeman, and I am here to perform the song called Stay With Me by Sam Smith. Hope you enjoy. Guess it's true, I'm not good at a one-night stand, but I still need love, 'cause I'm just a man. These nights never seem to go to plan. want you to leave, will you hold my hand? Oh, won't you stay with me? 'Cause you're all I need. This ain't love, it's clear to see. But darling, stay with me. Why am I so emotional? No, it's not a good look, gain some self-control. And deep down I know this never works. But if you lay with me, it won't hurt. Oh, won't you stay with me? 'Cause you're all I need. This ain't love, it's clear to see. But darling, stay with me. Oh, won't you stay with me? 'Cause you're all I need. This ain't love, it's clear to see. So darling, stay with me. Oh, won't you stay with me? 'Cause you're all I need. This ain't love, it's clear to see. So darling, stay with me.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You know, one of the great things about being in a music school is you get to see these kids grow up. And of course, we're only 2.5 years old, but I remember the first time that Justin got up to sing, and it was in our Thursday open mic. And I remember he got up there and was like, is he going to make it? Is he going to do it? And I can't imagine that just a couple years later, he's standing up in front of all of you doing this on this stage. It's really, really incredible to see the growth in these kids, and it's really wonderful. The first day that I started working with Orange County Music and Dance, we ended up on a boat. One of Doug's ideas, I think. And we decided we were going to make a YouTube video with a YouTube star. Like, okay, come from a pretty conservative classical background, and so I was stretched a little bit, and I had no idea what I was in store for after that. But we did make the YouTube video, and we incorporated strings and choir and rock guitar and whatnot. And somebody saw that video. Actually, one of the producers of America's Got Talent saw that video, and they gave us a call. And we were in the middle of getting ready to put another program together where we were putting an orchestra together with rock musicians, and they said, do you guys want to be on America's Got Talent? Like, we really did not have the bandwidth to do that, but we had to do it. And so our next performer, she was the guitarist in that group. And so she's going to come, and she's played a lot with us. It's wonderful to see her grow. She's got her own style, a lot of attitude. So please welcome to the stage, Jasmine.
Okay, check, check. Okay, hi guys, my name is Jasmine Starr. I'm 16 years old. Thank you guys so much for having me. Thank you, OC Music and Dance. This is Landslide. I took my love, took it down. Climbed a mountain and turned around, and I saw my reflection in the snow-covered hill, till the landslide brought me down. Oh, mirror in the sky, what is a love? Can the child within my heart rise above? Can I sail through the changing ocean tides? Can I handle the seasons of my life? Well, I've been afraid of changes, 'cause I've built my life around. Time makes you bolder, even children get older, and I'm getting older too. I'm getting older too. Changes, 'cause I built my life around you. But time makes you bolder, even children get older, and I'm getting older too. I'm getting older too. Take this love, take it down. Climb a mountain and turn around. And if you see my reflection in the snow-covered hill, will the landslide bring you down? Will the landslide bring you down? Will the landslide bring you down? Thank you guys very much. Have an awesome rest of your evening.
All right, bear with us just a little bit. We have a pretty major stage change to do right now. I'll tell you a little bit about what's happening next. So we have a sort of mini string ensemble / bassoon orchestra for you. We're going to be playing the Vivaldi E major concerto. So when you think of Vivaldi, everyone thinks of the seasons. Believe it or not, Vivaldi wrote 500 concertos. 240 of them were for violin. And so about maybe 2 months ago, one of our piano faculty, who happens to just play the violin, approached me and he says, I want to do a concert. I'm like, okay, that's great. And he started to list the program down. He wanted to do 2 Vivaldi concertos, a Bach solo sonata, 3 sort of Biber church sonatas, a couple of the Bach chaconne. I mean, we ended up doing the concert. It ended up taking 2 hours and 45 minutes to do the concert, believe it or not. We're not going to do that to you tonight. A couple of things about Vivaldi when he played and his history is Vivaldi, believe it or not, was a very, very virtuosic violinist. He had bright red hair, and so he was kind of the rock star of his day. Vivaldi was also an educator. Vivaldi worked at basically an orphanage for abandoned children. And the kids were high school age, and so a lot of the pieces that he wrote for that group. He was a priest for a little while there, and the end of the Vivaldi story is a very successful career, but at the end he decided he was going to make his big break. So he was going to move to Vienna, because at the time Vienna was where it was all going to happen. And so he did, and he was expecting to get some help from the royalty, the monarch there. All musicians back then, you had to have that. Fortunately, when he got there, the monarch passed away, and Vivaldi's funding dried up, and so a year later, Vivaldi also passed away, broke. I'm not saying that to scare all the young musicians here in the room, but I'm saying that basically because music is an art form. It's not something that can be sold. It's something that's given. It's something that's shared. And in order to do this, we need people like Charlie and Doug and many of you in this room who support your local arts. And without your support, our young musicians wouldn't have the opportunity to find a passion for music, to share it with others, and to grow as people. And so to all of you, for all that you do and the opportunities that the Nixon Library presents to us to give us a space and a wonderful and a beautiful place to play, thank you so much. Now, you're looking at the stage here as they're setting up, and you see that word Yamaha over there, and you're thinking, what does Vivaldi have to do with Yamaha? Well, similar to jazz, back in the day in the Baroque orchestras, we'd have what we call the continuo, and the continuo is basically the combo part of the group. So we have 2 bass parts. We have the cello, and we have the bassoon, who play the bass part. And then I'm going to play the harpsichord via Yamaha on that. And I think we're just about set up here, so we're good. We're going to do a quick tuning. I'm actually playing on this piece, and of course, here's the score here, and I think I've got something else. And one thing about the keyboard part is that it's not actually written out. You just have to make it up. So we'll see what happens. I think they're calling me there soon, but the form of this piece is in 3 movements, and it's very technical terms that we use for this. It's based on the church sonatas of the day, and so the first movement is fast, the second movement is slow, and the third movement is fast. So 3 movements, and then just to close the night, a beautiful, beautiful piece, the Bach Air from his orchestral suite. And once again, thank you so much for having us. Enjoy the music.
One more. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes tonight's performance, and I think we can all agree that we can add this performance to the list of great performances in the East Room. So thank you to these marvelous performers from OC Music and Dance. Thank you to Bill Allman for being here and regaling us with stories from the White House. And thank you to all of you. Thank you to Charlie and Ling for your generosity. Good night, ladies and gentlemen, and we'll see you back at the Nixon Library soon. Thank you.